All right. Hey, folks, it's Keith, Victor Echo 3 Sierra Victor Quebec, also known as the Shaky Key. And today I'm going to look at a topic that I think scares a lot of new Morse code operators, those who've either just about to get on the air or getting on the air, and that's calling CQ. So, what I want to look at today is just a very general sort of overview of the process, how it's done, different ways you can do it, what's involved, and just try and settle some of you down so you realize it's not that big a deal. So, this is really what we're going to do. So, we'll do an intro on it, go over some of that. We'll give you some actual examples of how some people and organizations do it, and then we'll get into some other stuff after. And towards the end, I'll probably give you a couple of hints of things that maybe you might not want to do. So, all right. So, just to introduce the topic, calling CQ, right? Throwing out CQ call and trying to get someone to come back to you for any number of reasons. It could be you're just looking for someone to chat with, rag chew. It could be maybe you're a POTA activator and you're trying to get people to call you so you can get credit for the park. Worldwide flora and fauna, same thing. It could be a contest. It could be a QSO party. There's all sorts of reasons as to why you might want to call CQ. But I think two things to keep in mind. Number one, there are no sort of precise rules. You must do it just this way. No, there's a lot of flexibility. You as an operator have a lot of flexibility how you do it. There are certainly practices that have come down over the years, over decades of use by various Morse code operators. So there's things that we know generally work well, and those tend to be the procedures that a lot of the people follow today. And we'll get into some of that in a little bit. But just remember now, if you're all worried about going on the air and having to call CQ, nothing says you do. I went through, I don't know, 120 DX countries. I don't think I ever called CQ. I was answering CQs, for parks on the air. You don't ever have to go and sit in a park and activate one, calling CQ. You can hunt as much as you want. So there's nothing that says you must do it. Once you get over the hump and you've done it a few times, I think you begin to realize it's not that big scary monster we all thought it was. And I know for myself, I rarely called CQ even on a single sideband or in contests. I tended to hunt and find, or hunt and pounce, I guess they call it. So search and pounce. That was my preferred way of operating. It still is, even with Morse code. But if you are going to do it, a few things that you need to know. Number one, know how to send question mark. As long as you can send a question mark, if someone comes back with a call that you don't, get all the letters or numbers, that's what the question mark is for. So learn how to send the question mark and listen to Parks on the Air. Listen to the number of times operators send a question mark, trying to get more information on whatever the person's call is. So absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. All right, it's perfectly okay. All right, so let's get into what's involved. Well, calling CQ simply means you want someone to come back to you. Right? It's as simple as that. There's lots of personal choice as to how you do it. Certainly, like I say, over the years, people have found certain methods, if you want, practices work better than others. So those are the ones that most people practice. If you are joining an organization, let's say Straight Key Century Club, the SKCC, or maybe FIST, FISTS, these organizations have a web page. Go to the web page. A lot of them will give you somewhere on that web page a link for new Morse code operators. They'll even give you a sample script so you can look at it and see how they like you to call CQ. All right, it's not rocket science. It's clear cut. It's easy. Once you figure it out how they want it done, make yourself a cheat sheet. Because what very often happens, especially when you're new and on the air, you panic. We've all done it. Your brain freezes. So if you have it written down and you're partway through your CQ script and you forget, what comes next, you can glance over. It's right there. Very simple. Especially if you're in a park and you're doing a park for the first few times, have a simple script there. You can call CQ, you can look at your script. No one knows but you. And you can have your entire conversation there. So relax. The idea here is to have fun. Now, one of the things that you will hear people reference is sort of the format or the how they lay out their CQ call. You'll hear people refer to a 3x3 call, 3x2, maybe a 2x1. So when you're doing CQ, all we're referring to here is how many times do you actually send the letters CQ, CQ, CQ. That's 3. And then you have a linking word, the word de, basically French for the word from. And then your call sign. So if you send your call sign 3 times, so you've sent 3 CQs, the de, and then your call sign 3 times, followed by the letter K, that's a 3x3 call. If you send CQ 3 times and send your, then the de, and then your call sign twice, followed by the letter K, that's a 3x2. So different organizations will suggest what they think works the best. And if you're in that organization, try it. Try what they suggest. You have enough flexibility that as you go forward, you can adjust. And you can adjust to what works best for you. You can adjust as to the conditions. For instance, if the bands are really crappy and noisy and it's hard to pull Morse code out, you may want to go for a longer CQ call as opposed to a shorter one. So maybe you'll make it a 3x3. If the bands are really good, nice and clear, you may go for, who knows, 3x2. If you're in a park and you're trying to activate those first few times when you're on that frequency, you want to make sure you've got that frequency. You may want to do a longer, right? A 3x3 call, maybe a couple of times just to get yourself established. And once people start coming back to you, then you can shorten it. Maybe do a 2x1. It's up to you. You're in charge. It really is up to you to decide how you want to proceed. So let's look at some of the examples. For instance, the one I used at the very beginning here, that would be a typical CQ call. So I'll play it again. I've set it up on my radio in the memory, so I'm doing this on purpose rather than me sending. I've set it at exactly 12 words per minute. And the reason for that is sort of the speed most of you are going to be doing once you get on the air. You may get on at 10, be able to do 10 words per minute, copy 10 words per minute, send at 10 words per minute. But you always find, and I think we all find, once you're doing it a few times, your speed does pick up a little bit. So 12 words per minute, especially with a straight key, which is what I use, is quite common. So listen, and like I say, I put it at 12 words per minute because I want you to hear how long all of this takes. It's not split second stuff, all right? It takes time. So one of the other things you need to do is remember, don't rush just because you think it's taking a little time. So I'll play this one more time, and you'll hear exactly what I mean. So there you go. That was a 2x2. So you can see how much time it took to do it, to take up a 2x2. Lots of organizations out there will suggest a 3x3 call. In other words, that extra CQ, so CQ, 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 DE, and then your call sign 3 times, followed by a K. That's one of the suggestions that the Straight Key Century Club makes. All right, if you go to their page, that's one of the ones that they feel works the best. To get picked up, for example, on the reverse beacon network, it will pick you up if you're calling, a 2x2, CQ, CQ, duh, your call sign twice and K. It will pick you up that way. If you did it 3 times, it would still pick you up. So it's up to you what you do and how you do things. Now, a lot of the organizations that I checked out, like I'm one of those fanatical people. I like to have everything in front of me laid out. So when I first got on the air, I was going through every website you can imagine, just trying to see how they would prefer that I did it, how they would prefer that I send a CQ. And, a lot of it's very similar. So save yourself the time, pick one of those formats and stick with it. So if you really are just looking to talk to anyone, that's essentially a very easy call. So you can do a 3x3. Remember to always include the letter K at the very end, which says, you're open for someone to respond. So 3x3, 2x2, 3x2, it's entirely up to you. But on occasion, you may want to talk to specific people. It could be people involved in a certain contest, right? Maybe that's who you want to talk to. It could be possibly, other SKCC members, because you're collecting membership numbers for awards. So in that type of situation, you can actually be specific. I want to talk to SKCC members. So what you might hear is someone go CQ, 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 SKCC, duh, and then their call sign, whatever number of times they want to send it, followed by the letter K. And that will tell people listening that they're looking for an SKCC member. LICW, which has one of their challenge, and other ones where you collect membership numbers and so on. They like to use CQ, CQ, LICW, followed by the duh and the call signs, the number of times you want to use it, and so on. And probably one of the very best examples of it is POTA, right? Turn into any activator and listen to them call CQ. Now this one is going to be probably 2x2, I guess, for the most part. So really what that activator has said, he's in a park, he's doing parks on the air, and he's looking for people who are willing to do parks on the air. Pretty simple. All right, so don't get too bent out of shape with some of this. If you look at, for instance, again, going back to the SKCC, they have a weekend sprint, which is abbreviated as WES. So very often you will hear, CQ, WES, CQ, WES, duh, and then the call signs and so on. So it just gives you an idea of what's happening. And for the most part, it's a lot of listening. What is the operator looking for? So for the most part, you're going to get this just by listening to what they're sending, listening to, any of little abbreviations that are in there. There's one really good one. It's a fun one coming up shortly. And this is being run by one of the QRP associations. And it's a zombie hunt because it's near Halloween, right? We're almost at Halloween here. So how do you call CQ for the zombie hunt? CQ, boo. So CQ, BOO. CQ, BOO. All right, so you can have a bit of fun with some of this stuff too. Another organization which is actually has one of the absolute best examples of a CQ. It's so easy to pick up. Is the K1USN and the SST. It's just one of those sounds. You hear it, you know instantly what it's all about. Now that event for over here, I'm sort of Ontario, Canada, Friday afternoons and again Sunday evening, and it is such a distinctive call sign. You absolutely cannot miss it. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole CQ here. I'm just going to give you the first part because the rest is always the same, right? The DE, your call sign, once, twice, three times, whatever you prefer, followed by the letter K. So listen to this. This is one, you pick it up instantly when you hear it. That da. I mean, it's just, you spot it instantly. When you're a new operator, that's one of the events that is fun to go in because it's a very simple exchange and it gets you over the jitters of, when you're first getting on the air. So that sort of covers your general format if you want, or the basics. Is it a 2x2, a 3x2 call, 2x1 call, whatever? That's your option, and obviously a lot of that is going to be determined by the conditions at that time. So if the bands are really noisy, you may want to go with that 3x3 call. If you want to call just people from a certain group, you can add their abbreviation that they like to use. All of that you can find online on your own, so it's not difficult to look up. Now, a couple of thoughts on things that you don't want to necessarily do, and then we'll get into another area. You hear in contests, especially in single sideband, I hear it fairly often, and someone starts calling CQ, and they go, whatever event it is, CQ, 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 on and on and on and on. Try that in Morse code and see how fast your hand gets tired or your arm gets tired, glass arm and so on. And outside of the fact, it's just darn boring. So I think you will find, and I listened to one poor person, I'm going to say about 6-7 days ago in a park, and they were doing that for POTA. There would be 6 or 7 CQs, and then they would do the POTA, then the DE and their call sign. And I actually stopped listening to them and simply said, nah, I don't need to sit it, because if I try and reach that person and someone else beats me out, now I've got to sit back and listen to all of that again. So no, it's not going to happen. So just a little bit of word of advice. Don't go for these extra long CQ calls, especially in Morse code. People are going to get bored listening to you pretty fast, and you're probably going to cut down on the number of contacts that you're going to have. So that was one. There's another example where you don't do a CQ call, and although I'm hearing them, and I think it's probably mainly newer operators making that mistake. And these are what we call an arranged call or an arranged contact. It's possible for you to scroll around, and I'm going to use the SKCC because it happens a lot there. You can go into the SKCC, and down one side of their page, someone will be there. There'll be their call sign, and they'll say calling CQ on a certain frequency. So you have a couple of options. One is to just go to the frequency, and if you hear them, answer just like you would answer any CQ call. Absolutely no problem. However, on occasion, and fairly often, you may send, because on that site you can send private messages to each other. You may send a private message and say, hey, I see you're on that frequency. How about we make a contact, and the other person will come back and say, yeah, sure. And then it's up to the two of you to decide who is going to do the calling. It may be the station that's already calling CQ will say, okay, I'll call you, just listen for me. And they'll send you a call, but they're not sending a CQ. If you, as the other operator, are calling that station, you go up and you see them, they're on there, you arrange to meet that person on that frequency and say, okay, let me give you a call. You don't go on the air and call CQ and expect that person to answer, because anyone can answer. You've just put out an all points bulletin type thing, talk to anyone. In that case, you can do your 2x2 or your 2x1 format, whatever you want, but you put the other person's call sign in instead of CQ. So if I am looking for Bob, and Bob is VA3KEI, I might go on and say VA3KEI de VE3SVQ, maybe once, maybe twice, because he's expecting my call. So don't, when it's a prearranged call, don't go in and think that person, you have to call that person via a CQ call. All right, you make it a personal call. It's a little bit easier than that. And one other point I want to raise, because I see a bit of that, I get a bit of this. Um, I'm having a conversation with someone, probably answered to CQ, and he and I are having a conversation. That operator may have been on that frequency, who knows, for hours. And, he's been calling, and I happen to give him a call. So we have our conversation. And as we wrap up, another operator who's listening to the conversation decides they want to talk to me. So they call me, very quickly send, my VE3 SVQ call to try and get my attention. When that happens, and it does happen reasonably enough because my call is well known through these videos and students I teach, it's very rude if I now go back and answer that second call and carry on a conversation on the other person's frequency. So what in effect has happened when I answer that call, the operator who's been calling CQ on that frequency, he's sidelined whilst we have our conversation. So I would suggest you don't do that. The easiest thing to do, if for some reason you really want to take that call, that person who's sort of tagged on at the end, suggest they QSY up 5 or whatever and get off the other person's frequency, get off the frequency of the person who's been calling CQ. And it's just polite, it's common sense. Don't steal the frequency from them, because now that you've got a conversation going with a second person, the original operator sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. And what happens if someone else joins the conversation? So just, use a little common sense. One, you don't have to take that second call, and I very often don't. I just let it go. Or if it's a call maybe I recognize, I'll suggest, QSY up 5, and then thank the other operator and get out of his way so we continue to call CQ. So that's basically it. Like I said at the beginning, it was not intended to be the definitive all-time guide to how to call CQ. It was simply to give some of the newer operators an ideas to how it's done, processes or formats that they can use. There's lots of information out there on the web for people to look at and see it, to see other examples and so on. The purpose was just to provide some very general, very basic information for new operators, so that if they decide they are going to try a CQ call, and I always suggest you do. When I came back to radio and decided to go back on, doing Morse code, my very first call was a CQ call. All right, so it's up to you if you want to try that, or if you'd rather just answer CQs for a while. I suggest a lot of you will probably answer. And then down the road, sooner or later, you're going to get that urge to do your own CQ call. So that's it for now. I hope it helps some of you out. And like I said, it's not to be taken as gospel. You've got to do everything this way. It's general information for you. So if you like this video, please, like, share, comment down below. Certainly YouTube likes when you do. And, it always helps push our channel out to more people. And, if you do join some organization, whether it's SKCC, FIS, or any of those groups out there, and, they ask how you found them, hey, you can always tell them the shaky key, VE3SVQ, sent you. I like to see that because I do get notes on that type of thing. And it's nice to know that people are following what's going on in some of these videos and reacting and progressing on their Morse code journey, because it always is. It's a journey. You never know everything. You're always learning something new. It's Keith, VE3SVQ, the shaky key, wishing you a great day. 73.